Hi there, just a quick little study and video on monochromatic painting. Monochromatic painting means one color paint. In this case, it's white and blue, so it is two colors, but really the color they're talking about or indicating when you say monochromatic is the ultramarine blue in this case. So here's an example of 3 little monochromatic studies. This was one done in ultramarine blue of this little cup just sitting across the table. Just put it right here. And then, for example, here's a monochromatic study of the same cup in red to white, or a third monochromatic study of the same cup in yellow to white. And so across the top on these cards you can see that I took titanium white and then I kept tinting it with deeper pigments of yellow. This is a value mixing study of cadmium red to white. So you can see there's just a very light pink, slightly darker, slightly darker, slightly darker to the red out of the tube. This is very much like the exercise we were doing before. And here's white to light blue to a little bit darker, a little bit darker. So it's just the value steps shifting and changing. And just like when we painted from white to black, but we're changing this to be a study in blue to white. And the underpainting will be done in this color blue. There is no black on here. And then this value studies will be put in over top with the whites and the off colors of blue, the different values of blue. So I'm just gonna do a quick little painting to give you an idea of how to do a monochromatic painting. These are a set of cards that I started. I think it's really useful for you to make cards, or maybe make, you can make smaller paintings on one big piece, just to give you the source, like use these as a resource to go to as you're learning to paint. This will be helpful for you to look back at. It's a fun exercise that should be fairly simple, and you don't have to spend a ton of time on these. As you can see, I took white paint and then I just mixed the separate steps over to the ultramarine blue. I have a clean jar of water over here. I'm looking at my little cup. And before I even start painting the cup, just because I want to make this set of cards, I'm just gonna come across the top here. And I'm cleaning my brush out a lot, and then I have a rag over here on the side that I'm drying it out. I got a little bit of extra water on there at first. That's not a problem. I think the pigments are a little truer to what I mixed if I don't add too much water in, so I'm kind of trying to thicken that paint up. And a little bit darker blue. And one step darker. This is blue. This is ultramarine blue right out of the tube here on the end. Now, see how that water's getting dispersed? I made the mistake of letting this brush sit in the ball jar of water for too long, so some of that water's hanging out in the ferrule of the brush, and even when I'm drying it off, it's pushing down into the paint. That's not a problem, but it's something to be aware of. And if you don't like having your paint bleed or feel watery, then, you know, try not to do that with your brush or use a different brush. I'm going to stick with this one. I like this size brush for this very small study. So the idea, if you're working at home, is that you may mix a monochromatic palette like this and then make a little study. I wouldn't spend a lot of time on the study, 5 to 10 minutes, and then I would mix a palette of white to red or a palette of white to yellow and make additional studies. How much time you have to put in this today is up to you. You could make a dozen studies. You could do one in burnt umber. You could do one in green. You could use every paint tube color that you have in your house and make as many as you want. That would be wonderful. But if you only do one, and that's the only monochromatic you ever do, it's not going to be a problem. It just depends how much time and interest you have in it. What's nice about this exercise is it teaches you about how each pigment acts individually with the color white before we move on and we get into the more expanded color mixing, which gets kind of complicated. So first of all, I am watering my paint a bit now to make a washy underpainting. I'm just doing a little study of this cup. Not going to overthink it. And while that dries, I'm going to pick the color of the wood top of this table. The cup, let's see if you can see my little cup sitting down there. Yeah, it's on, the background of it's on wood. So I want to measure my values here to guess which one is best. Now this is the whole trick, is trying to think about the value of the wood color, which is orange, to the value of this blue. Squinting helps a little bit. I'm going to say it's between these two. And then I'm just going to go ahead and get this painted in for my background color. A little cue card like this is nice because you can make a stack of them. And now as it's hitting the paper, I'm realizing maybe I could go a little darker with it. I'm not going to worry about that surface detail of the wood grain. It's not important for this exercise. It's just a value study. And you know, you might be thinking about the form of the cup, but not details. Just getting that value laid out. While I'm waiting for my underpainting to dry. Rather than making a painting today, this is an exercise. When I was in art school, we did these exercises for a whole semester. We just painted monochromatic paintings in much bigger, like more complex, like full still life. I have you do this smaller. I want you to try to paint smaller and faster just for today to see what it feels like. So I'm coming in here, I'm looking at that little cup. And then the interior of the cup, I can see the bottom from the angle that I'm at right there. And then across the top, it's in shadow, so it's darker. this this area should be even darker. There we go. Oops. My paint's quite wet, so I'm sort of losing what I'm putting in over top. And just come across here and deepen that. That feels pretty good. Now the actual rim of this is what the light's hitting the most. So I'm going to describe that with just white. This white here on the end is white right out of the tube. Now my paint's wet and I'm losing that contrast because as it goes on wet, it's kind of blending. But I'm not going to worry about that too much right now. I'm just going to move on to the next step. What I can see as I'm looking at my still life, that this is a little more in shadow, and there's actually a bit of shadow across here below the cup on the tabletop. So I'm going to put some indicator in that it's not just floating. And the color's a little deeper across here. Oh, not that deep. I went much darker than the actual value is. First, I'm going to use that wet on wet method with my brush to kind of soften that in with the other paint. And then I can take this lighter color across the left, try to brighten that up a bit. So this is a monochromatic study. Just quick, easy. You can do these in more elaborate, like set up a whole still life if you want to spend more time, but you can also do these really quickly and kind of get through them. If you have a lot of paint left on your palette at the end, and you're wondering what to do with it, one thing you can do is take old paintings that you don't like and paint over top of them with this leftover palette paint. Let that dry and we'll use them to paint on top of later on in the session. You can make a series of little tiny monochromatic paintings or work out something bigger. Never feel like you need to throw that paint out. Get that paint down, take your palette knife, scrape it across some paper. There's always a way that you can use it later. Now where the cup sits on the table is the darkest shadow that I see. So I want to get that in underneath that cup. And then maybe just come across here and push that back a little bit. There we go. Now, the right side of my cup is more in shadow, and the light is coming in behind it from a window. So what I'm seeing is that the tabletop is actually appearing to be a lighter value than my object. So I'm coming in with this lighter value across the back. It's a little lighter over here too. Just soften that shadow a little. It's not a super strong contrasty shadow. And then I'm trying to get that very bright white still across this top edge. Yeah. That feels pretty good for a little study. You get the whole sense of the white to dark and the blue for the monochromatic, and just a little cup study. So try a few of those. You can take your leftover paint. Let's say you have some other surface that, you know, I was just using this earlier for a different demo. You can take your extra paint and just cover the surface, and we'll make some paintings on this later. These won't go to waste. Can be, think of it as an abstraction, or you can, you know, just use it up. So this is week 3. And what I would suggest is trying a monochromatic study in ultramarine blue. I think you get the idea about using the paint up. You keep sure you have lots of paintings that you started that you don't like, or some extra paper that you can just toss that paint down on there and use it up so it doesn't go to waste. But your work this week, I'd love to see you do a monochromatic in blue, a monochromatic in red, and a monochromatic in yellow. If you want to do more, or you want to do larger, more elaborate paintings, that's wonderful. But at least I almost think of these as little thumbnails. And you can see the difference between this painting and this one. This painting I had the cup sitting on the wooden tabletop, which is fairly light, and on this painting I had a piece of black fabric under the cup. Now the black fabric just read as the darkest value that we could find on our value scale. So have fun with that, and thanks. This is Monochromatic Painting, week 3. Thanks for being here.